If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560. The Answer.
Dan and Amy, I don't know who's having more trouble putting butts in the seats. An old plagiarist peddling a cure for cancer or the Norma Desmond of 80s pop. They're both struggling.
Well, Biden yesterday had a big announcement that, even though he's running for president, he's still going to do the task that President Obama appointed him, and that's cure cancer.
A lot of you understand that what loss is, and when loss occurs, that people come up to you and tell you, I understand if you lose a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, a family member, and lots of times you feel like saying, they say, I know how you feel, and if they hadn't, you look at them, they mean well, but you say, you have no idea how I feel. But when it happens to you, That's why I've worked so hard in my career to make sure that I promise you, if I'm elected president, you're going to see the single most important thing that changes in America is we're going to cure cancer. You think but that's another issue.
That's a big campaign promise. Wow.
I mean, honestly, it's just shameless. It really is just shameless. Finally, somebody's come out against cancer and a desire to see it cured. Wow. Oh, by the way, while Joe Biden has been peddling the story about his great work in advance of curing cancer, I'd love to hear the specifics. What specifically have you done since you were designated as the cancer czar by President Obama in his State of the Union address on his way out the door? Specifically. Anybody want to follow up with that? But while he's peddling that snake oil in Iowa, we're revisiting some of what else Joe Biden was peddling during his time as vice president. Junior League Clinton Foundation stuff, as Peter Schweitzer documented in his book, Secret Empires. And that's coming back around. That's not going away. Schweitzer reminding us of Hunter Biden's forays into the energy business in Ukraine, forays into private equity with the help of the Chinese.
Yeah, so in the case of the Ukraine, Hunter Biden joins the board of Burisma, a troubled energy company in Ukraine, in the spring of 2014. It's important for people to know that he had no background in Ukraine. He had no background in energy policy. What I think he had was a father who was point person in the Obama administration on U.S. aid dollars flowing to Ukraine. Basically, we know from financial records that Hunter Biden was getting $83,000 a month from Burisma, really basically doing nothing. And the Chinese at the same time struck a $1.5 billion private equity deal with Hunter Biden's small private equity firm called Rosemont Seneca Partners. Again, Eric, he had no background in China, really no background in private equity, but his father, as with Ukraine, was also Obama administration point person on policy towards China.
So no background in energy, no background in Ukraine. So obviously they make him a partner in an energy concern there. No background in private equity, no background in China. So obviously they invest in his nascent private equity play. I mean, it's the same thing that was happening, right, with the Clinton Foundation. You can't pay the money to secure the influence directly. So you do it to a foundation or to a family member. Tony Rodham, may he rest in peace, the cellular phone king of Haiti.
Oh, and when you go, because eventually you will go, everybody has a cell phone. You could be out in the middle of nowhere, and there's no housing, but every single family has a house.
Joe Biden, President Trump is right, maybe not for the reasons he stated in his, various criticisms of Joe Biden, from being a dummy to being low energy to being mentally feeble. But I continue to say this. Most of the pundits we've had on the show disagree with me. Fine, we'll see. Joe Biden is, in fact, the weakest candidate the socialists could nominate against President Trump.
Using cancer to get votes is very slimy, too. Doesn't sit well with me.
You think that's slimy?
Ugh.
He's stealing material from Michael Avenatti.
Oh, that's right.
creepy porn lawyer, Michael Avenatti. His whole "Let's Make America America Again," which he was riffing in Iowa yesterday. Avenatti posted tweets while he's still a free man of him saying precisely the same thing back last fall and cutting videos with that sloganeering and message positioning when he was exploring a run for president. I mean, this is just a circus, isn't it? Oh, for more on these fun topics and a few others, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Moore. He is noted economist and Wall Street Journal columnist. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Also, the book. Oh, I forgot the book. Well, no. Let me promote the book. Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to Revive Our Economy. Steve Moore, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you for getting that in, Dan,
Yes,
Amy. I mean,
yes.
That's the most important thing of all.
Exactly.
By the way, as you guys know, I did CNN I was with Fake News for over 2 years. I remember so vividly being in the CNN green room waiting to go on. And, of course, who did they have on every night? Who was the savior of the Democratic
Michael
Party?
Avenatti.
The man who was going to beat Donald Trump. And the guy, you could just being in the same room with him, the guy was just so sleazy and slimy and disgusting. And I was like, this is a great white hope of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Now he's in the cell that he belongs in. But I want to go back to something, if I may, that you started this conversation by talking about a cure for cancer and Biden. And I just wrote my column this week on this, that, it's Joe Biden and the liberals and some, Republicans as well, who first of all, they despise the drug companies, right? They hate the drug companies. Big Pharma, they're evil. They're gouging consumers. We have to put price controls. And you put price controls on drug companies, and the evidence is crystal clear. You're going to slow the race to the cure. The new kind of drugs that we want to cure cancer, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, all of these are within our grasp. But if you tell the drug companies, how dare you make a profit off of this, then the money that flows in to find these amazing miracle cures will not happen. And so I just want to get that point across to people that, something like 80% of the wonder drugs over the last 30 years have been developed in the United States of America because we have a free enterprise system that people can invent these things and come up with these cures, and they can make money off of it. You take the money out of it, and guess what? You're not going to have the cures. So take that, Joe Biden.
I wanted to get your take. We haven't talked to you since the deal got done, but I'm sure you're as happy as I am that the imposition of tariffs on Mexico was avoided, and Trump seems to have secured material concessions from the Mexican government to act substantively to prevent migrants from making their way to our southern border. It's a big political and, frankly, economic win for the president.
Well, boy, coming from you, Dan.
Well, it is. I don't like taxes.
So, look, I didn't like the idea when it was first announced. You and I and Amy talked about this, and I was very uneasy about it. But I have discovered, having spent the last 3 years or so in or with or around Donald Trump, that the guy does know how to negotiate. I mean, he is a master negotiator. You read his book, The Art of the Deal, and he realizes one thing in negotiations, that anyone, no matter what area of life you're in, when you negotiate, you want to have leverage. And Trump understood the United States has, some leverage over Mexico. They are totally dependent on being able to sell things in the United States. And as soon as he threatened them with the tariff, boy, did they become cooperative on the border. Now, do I love the idea of using tariffs as a club every time we have a tiff with some country around the world? No, that strategy does scare me. So I'll do that, Dan.
All right. Well, what about now? It worked with Mexico. How can we make it work with China? Come on, Stephen Moore.
Well, Amy, that is the $64 billion question, isn't it? Can this strategy work with China? I believe in the end it will. But, China is not Mexico. I mean, China is the second largest economy in the world. They are a totalitarian government. And so, if these tariffs throw a lot of their workers into the unemployment lines, I'm not so sure the leaders in Beijing care much. I mean, I was just reading the other day about how Mao, starved to death 50 million of his own people. So you've got autocratic leaders, and they don't mind causing misery to their own people. So it's a risky strategy. In the end, I still think Trump will prevail because China needs to have access to America's markets for their wonder economic machine to grow.
Well, Trump said yesterday before jetting off to Iowa that he's holding up the China deal, that we're going to do a great deal or we're going to do no deal at all, and that he's holding it up. How did you interpret that? He's holding it up because we don't have a good enough deal yet, or there's something specific? Yeah. How do you view that?
I saw that statement too. And I was trying to figure out exactly what he was talking about. And I think, having talked to Trump about this, I mean, the big deal. It's a real problem in negotiating with China because especially the Beijing leaders, they don't have Western ethics towards keeping your word or right of contract or anything like that. So the Chinese, I mean, I've talked to our negotiators. One day they'll agree to one thing, and the next day they'll do just the opposite. They won't even in the negotiations. They won't even admit that they're stealing our intellectual property. They deny that it's happening. We know that it's happening to the tune of about $300 billion a year. So it's very difficult to negotiate with a criminal. And somebody who's so many of their trade practices now are complete violations of the World Trade Organization and what they signed up for. So I think that's what Trump meant. Is like, it's one thing for China to say, oh, we'll do A, B, and C. It's another to have some kind of enforcement mechanism to make sure they do it. And that's, I understand, from my sources, that's where the whole negotiations broke down, is China didn't want any kind of validation or verification. And I go back to Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. You have to have verification that these and by the way, I said it last week, and I say it again, we got to call them Red China, because they're right back to their totalitarian ways in China with respect to, and nobody in the media talks about there's no freedom of press over there. There's no freedom of speech. There's religious persecution. They're throwing any political dissidents in prison. Why don't we read about that in the American press?
Right, and we got 1 million people in Hong Kong rioting against the government, right, at present over this extradition law, and good for them for doing so. We
were always hoping, that Hong Kong would take over China.
Yeah.
And now it looks like China's taking over Hong Kong. I mean, no, this is the new. I really think that with each passing day, Americans are starting to understand this is a new Cold War we're in with China. They're out of control.
He is Steve Moore, economist, Wall Street Journal columnist. The book, Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to Revive Our Economy. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Okay, go Cubs. See you guys.
Okay, all right. And go White Sox. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today.